Idea number 8 is the centrality of the church. If you go back and you study ancient history, basically every civilization that has ever existed puts the most important thing at the middle of the town, of the city, of the house, everything. The most important thing goes in the middle, and it's usually the tallest building. What's the tallest building in our cities today? We got like banks and insurance companies. So we got a very backwards way of viewing the world. This is a very new concept to have the banks and the insurance companies be at the center of everything. What is at the center is basically the foundation of your world. And this is a huge problem. Well, we talked earlier about why is it that in the greatest country in the history of the earth, so much of the regular people just have a problem paying their bills? Well, who's getting all of the money and how are they distributing it? Well, if you look at who's got the tallest buildings, that's probably likely who's got the most of the money. And who's got all that money? The banks and the insurance companies. In the Renaissance times, and in basically every other time in the history of the world, the church was at the center. The church was the foundation of the world, and the church had the tallest building. Now, I'm not talking about just Christian churches. I'm not trying to lose you here if you're not Christian. But this is something that, and no matter whether you're a pagan or whether you were a Christian, whether it was ancient Egypt, no matter what type of ancient Mesopotamian, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, in the center of your village, you have the church. And this is the thing that, this is the way to fix and balance the meritocracy. Because the church has the charity. They distribute the food and the clothes. They help with the crisis relief. There's a bunch of people out there who don't have the farmland, who don't have the properly walled house. There's a bunch of people who don't have all these ideas that are going to help prevent them from downfalling in a catastrophe. It's through the church that you get that crisis relief, that you get that charity. And that's the balance to the meritocracy, because the meritocracy says whoever gives the most to the society is the most valuable. And the church balances that and says, hold up now, let's not forget about the widows and the orphans here. And so this is why the church encouraged the rich people, hey, look, donate a portion of your money to the church so we can help distribute it out to those in need. I understand. You focus on your business. You do you. You have to do that. But let us take care of the rest. Let us be the center, the foundation. And so without that, your meritocracy really descends into something extremely hideous and ugly. It turns into this hideous beast that totally discards members of society that they view as invaluable or less than. This is just and this is like the ugliest system you could possibly imagine, and this is something very close to what we're living in today. Churches were the community center. People would gather here, and it wasn't just like their liturgy and their mass, although that was a huge portion of it. Like, it's an orientation mechanism. We all know where the middle is, and we all know how to get there. It was an optimization chamber. Like when you step inside of it, the architecture and the sounds and the things that we're talking about and the images that you're seeing, it's all designed to point you towards a higher purpose and orient everybody towards a common good. So it's like, it's an orienting mechanism and an optimization chamber. And it's also a morality compass. Like it tells you what's good and what's bad. There wasn't this subjectivism with morality. Like I said at the very beginning, Plato had this idea of objectiveness of good, objectiveness of beauty, and objectiveness of truth. This is something that religion embodies. The word religion comes from the Latin religio, which means like to bind together. And so you have to have like we talked about diversity. Well, diversity for diversity's sake is not necessarily a good idea. What is it? What's the common ground that binds everybody together? And maybe in different parts of the world, it's different religions. I'm not making the claim that there's some absolute authority and monopoly on universal truth that any particular organization has. I mean, we can make an argument for different cases of different religions. This is not the point of this. But the point is that there has to be something at the center of the city. There's something at the center of the city that it keeps everything held together. Like, they literally kept the time. Like, if you think about the bells, there was a reason why they had the bells, because people weren't walking around with watches on their hands. There was like a reason for all of this. They kept the schedule. They regulated the schedule. They kept the feast days, and they kept the procession of the equinox, the procession of the equinox, the changes of the seasons, all of that. They literally kept the whole entire structure of reality regulated, so you could know, hey, it's this day of the week. It's that day of the week. On this day of the week, you do this. This is your rest day. This is the day you harvest. This is the day you plant. The church actually did all of that. It preserved all of the knowledge. And it did everything like that built up. We talked about the family being the center of like the microcosm, and then that branches out. Like the family is the microcosm of the largest form of government. Like it's actually the most purest form of government is a family. Well, who brought those weddings together? It was a religious ordeal. It was the church that initiated the weddings. Churches that did the baptisms. Whenever you would die and pass over to the other side, whatever that looked like in that culture, they would perform the funeral rites. And like I said before, they did the charity. The churches are the reason we have hospitals today. They would have, we talked about storehouses and storing up for dark times. The churches would have reserved pharmacies for crises. Because there was some pharmacies that were there just for business. You go here and you pay for your pills. But there was other times where it's like, what about the people who can't afford their medicine? Well, the church did that. The church preserved all of this, and it held everybody together. If it wasn't for churches, we wouldn't have universities. And what would they teach you in the universities? They would teach you how the universe works. They literally viewed religion as the foundation of the world and the universe. So when you would go to the universities, you were going there to learn, how does the universe work? And how do you work in harmony with the universe? You don't want to be someone who's at odds with the very thing that you're surrounded by. Because we're the only creatures who would go against their natural ability. Every other creature just goes with its instinct. But we have the ability to like pause and reflect and separate ourselves from the rest of the world. And this is an idea that was really brought about with the humanism, is like, hey, with this particular uniqueness to your position in the animal kingdom, you have an incredible responsibility, and we kind of just make up our own ways. So it's really important, if we just are the creature that can make up our own ways, let's make sure that we're making up a way that works in harmony with things around us. Because everything else just naturally falls into harmony. But we create these synthetic environments that actually are disconnected and set apart from the rest of the world. We create the most elaborate housing structures known to the animal kingdom. I mean, there's other animals that build pretty elaborate dwelling places, but by far, we have the best. Humankind has the most highest position in the world among all of the corporeal creatures. And so they would need someone to teach you about how to properly orient yourself. How to properly, because without that, it's just everybody against everybody. And they would need something to bind all these people together. The churches would they would put these ideas in the center of the towns and up on the public squares and up on the walls, and they would put these statues and all of these artworks up that would talk about these ideas, because most of the people at the time were illiterate. And so there was this cultural patronage of the church, where, a lot of the beauty that you get from all these medieval villages, you'll have atheists who travel, and they'll go travel all across the world and spend their whole entire paycheck to go look at this church and to look at these paintings of the Virgin Mary and Infant Christ. And it's like, well, why are you looking at that painting? I don't know. There's just something incredibly beautiful about it. Well, why are they? The church knew that there was something transcendent that you could capture that was outside of the liturgy, outside of the Mass, outside of the dogma, where you could even instill these values into art. You could instill them into the architecture, into the music. There's music today that you listen to, and you just know it's the most beautiful music in the world. Well, it doesn't matter what genre of music you're listening to. You could just tell. If there's a note that's off in the sequence, everybody could tell it. We could all say, yeah, clearly that's the wrong note right there, because there's a structure to the universe. And there's a harmony to it all. There's fundamental principles that everything is guided by. And they would say that that's the gods or God. And so you need someone to teach you about that. And what better to go to than the church? And the church was originally the creator of the universities. Like, they were actually originally the same thing. Now we've separated them. We have this idea of the separation of church and state. And this idea in America, the separation of church and state, is actually, most people don't really understand what that means. Because 9 out of the 13 original colonies all had requirements to be a Bible-believing, church-attending Christian. Like, if you take example for the Constitution of Delaware, it, like, you have to actually profess the Trinity. You have to say, like, you know, belief in Jesus Christ, God the Father, the Holy Spirit, so on and so forth, all of that. The Holy Scriptures are infallible. You had to say all of that. On the Liberty Bell, you have I think it's a quote from Leviticus. I think it was John Adams who said, America was made for a holy religious people. Like, the government is not built for that. And so we think of this idea of separation of church and state as like, oh, we should keep church out of government because government is somehow above the church. It's literally the opposite of what you're thinking. It's like the church is too high. It's too important. The government should be subservient to the church. So we shouldn't have a state-run religion. Like, the religion is much bigger than what any government could have a monopoly on. So it's really the exact opposite of what most people make it out to be. Oh, separation of church and state, separation of church and state. The church is below the government. It's like, actually, no, that's not what they meant. They meant the government is below the church. And so it's not the church's job to come in there. It's not the government's job to come in there and tell the church how to run. The church should run on its own accord, because if the government tries to get involved and try to tell the church how to do it, they're missing the point. So it's really worth looking into that whole separation of church and state idea that people love to parade around the day and talk about how this is such a great idea. Let's get rid of God because this is somehow make our society better. We can't. It's literally the foundation of everything. I mean, think about this. What year is it? This video is being made in the year 2025. 2025 years since what? It's all a religious idea, the whole entire framework. You could even go into, we talked about the fall of Rome. It's getting a little bit of a sidetrack, but it all connects back. So bear with me here. We talked about the fall of Rome. Even the days of the week has a religious structure to it. So with the Roman and the Latin world, you would have the days of the week aligned with the planets. So if you go like Italian or Latin, you would have Venerdì, which is Friday, and Venerdì is Venus Day. And then you would have Jovedi, which is Thursday, and that's a Jupiter day. You would have Lunedì, which is Monday, and that's Luna, the moon. So that's the moon day. So you would have all of these ideas that go particularly with the planets, and the planets are viewed as the gods. And so whenever Rome fell, the German Goths came in, and they have all this Norse mythology. And they started changing the names of the days of the week. Why exactly do we call it Wednesday? Why do we call it Wednesday and not Mercury Day? Because in the Latin world, it's and in Italian, it's Mercoledì. So why do we not call it Mercury Day? Oh, it's Odin's Day. Wednesday, Odin's Day. So it's because of the Norse god. So every time you're saying, oh, it's Wednesday, this day, Wednesday, September this, what you're actually saying is it's Odin's Day. So literally the religious structure is built into the language of every single thing that we use. Everything we use today could be traced back to something religious. You can't take out the religion. It's a fundamental aspect of everything that we use. And I could go on and on. So then you have Thursday. Why is it called Thursday instead of, what's the word? Okay, so Venerdì, Jovedi, which is Jupiter Day. Why do we not call it Jupiter Day? Why do we call it Thursday? Because it's Thor's Day. Odin's Day, Thor's Day. Freya's Day for Friday. Instead of Venus Day, it's Freya's Day. So you see what happens here? One culture comes over and they change all of the names of the days of the week to their gods. But what remains the same is that the gods are at the center. The gods are at the foundation. You cannot dispose with that. That's not an option. You could switch the gods out and you could change the names and all that, but the eternal principles remain the same. That there's a way that the universe was ordered and structured And different cultures have different ways of pointing towards that, but they all know it comes from the divine. And we thought that we're so much smarter than all of that. Now let's just throw away with all these superstitions. But that's not that was just this a totally new idea. It's this, oh, let's go to all these modern theories. Come on now. Pay attention to the history of the universe. Pay attention to the history of the world. There's not a culture in the whole entire history that thought that was a good idea until us now. And we think with all this access to information, we could somehow transcend the need for that. You can't. It has to be at the center. So I want to talk a little bit more about this. And we could go into a couple more topics, and I want to do that by going into quotes of famous figures from antiquity and from the Renaissance who had just really profound quotes. And we could go a little bit about what that implied of what they were saying, and then we'll wrap up this section. Here's a quote from Plato. The gods must have their due. Every city should establish temples as the center of its life. For without reverence to the divine, no community can prosper. This is that word reverence comes up over and over again. This is another part of the word religio, the Latin word religio, which means like to bind together, like you have an obligation. It also means like a reverence. The reverence, the common reverence you have is what binds together. Like, what do you all view as sacred? What do you all view as most important? That thing that everybody views as the most sacred and most important, that's the thing that binds them together. So like even you go back to that microcosm fractal idea of like, you have to view your family as sacred and set apart. And then that binds your family together. And then you have to view your city as that. And so even in their households, they would have, the rich people would put little chapels in their households because they wanted to bring God into their house. This is the concept that I found that's really amazing in Eastern Orthodoxy is you want to bring the church into your house. Like the Orthodox, they put up these little icons, the same icons that they put in their church, they put them into their houses too. And sometimes they'll burn incense, and you want it to be where you walk into the place and you feel like, hey, there's prayer that happens in here. Like this place is a miniature version of the church. You want your house to be like a miniature version of your church and a miniature version of your city and a miniature version of your country. Because then that truly shows where your allegiance is. It shows what type of person you are, and you could just walk in there and you just know, and you feel at home. You feel like, hey, look, I feel like I'm in an American home right now. I feel like I'm in a Christian home right now. And then maybe other parts of the world would say, hey, look, I'm in a Chinese home right now, and I'm in a Buddhist home right now. And that's cool. But at least it's clear what it is, because these people are based. And it's not like, oh, these people have all these superheroes on their wall, and they have this, that, and the other. And they're just so culturally confused, they don't even know what it is that they stand for. But at least if you go into a home where it has a sense of national pride, and it has a sense of like religious reverence, you kind of get an idea like that these people have a very strong foundation. Like these are not people to be messed with. Like these are very wise people. And usually those people are the most prosperous too. So this goes into like the church has to be at the center. You can't get over that. And so right now, what's our church? Oh, our churches are the banks and the insurance companies. But let's see how that goes in another 100 years if we keep that up. I don't think we'll be around as a culture if we keep that up. It's going to continue to get more and more dark. We have to do something about this. We have to put God back into the gods, whichever way you prefer. I'm not going to advocate for any particular religion. But we have to find a way to start putting that back into the center of our lives. Here's a quote from Cicero, the famous Roman orator. Religion is the foundation of the state, and the sacred rites and temples bind men together. No law can hold if the gods are not honored. Once again, religion is the foundation. All of our laws stem out of the Mosaic law, the Code of Hammurabi. All of these, a legal system is a religious system. There's an idea that goes along with that. In America, all men are created equal. It's not about your bloodline. This is a Florentine idea too. It's not about your bloodline. Even if you're a peasant, your life is still valuable and you should be treated fairly by the law. That's a religious idea. We can't get away with that. We need to have that back. The worship of the gods gives men a pattern for virtue. The temple stands as a reminder that life must be lived with reverence and justice. That's a quote from Seneca. So it's about a pattern for virtue. What does that mean? That the worship of the gods gives men a pattern for virtue. And the temple stands as a reminder. Well, we'll talk about the reminder real quick, and then we'll go to the pattern, because the pattern is a lot deeper of a concept. But the reminder, there's this story of in Genesis of Jacob, and he has a sleep. He has a dream. He falls asleep and has a dream of this ladder that's going up to heaven, and these angels coming back down. That's basically like going up, getting a message from the divine, and then bringing it back down to the practical reality of the world. He wakes up and he says, "Wow, I had no idea that God was here. So what do I need to do? I need to build an altar." Because God was there and he didn't even know it. So he needs something to remind him that life must be lived with reverence and justice, that there's an actual pattern to follow. Now, the idea of that the gods give men a pattern, like I said, everything is built actually into the language. Like this is not arbitrary. We think now we could just flip around the meanings of words and somehow that'll be fine. Not the case at all. There's a reason why it's Father Time and Mother Nature. If you haven't heard this before, buckle up, because this will totally reshape the whole entire way you see the world. What's the Latin word for father? Pater. The pattern. What's the Latin word for mother? Mater. Material. Here's a quote from Pico. "Through the church, a man finds the path to the divine truth, for it is the mother that nurtures our soul and guides us to the eternal court of God." So you have this religious idea. This is like kind of a Platonic idea. It's a very esoteric idea, but it's something that there's really profound meaning in the nature. You have your paternal and your maternal instincts. You have your Father Time and your Mother Earth. The time reveals the pattern. And so because the Father reveals the pattern, you have this spirit of being that goes in and inhabits the material realm. And that's the pattern merging with the material. And that's what turns it into life itself. Without the emergence of this too, it's just it's innate. You have like unembodied pattern and unanimated material. You have to combine both of them in order to have life. And this is something that they don't talk much about in science today. But whenever the Renaissance men were going out, it was illegal to study science in the Dark Ages, in the medieval ages. They just wanted everything to come from the church and everything to come from God. But with the rise of humanism, they said, let's study the human body. Let's see what we could learn. And there's all sorts of images of where they would, like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, they would literally go illegally dig up graves and go dissect people to understand anatomy and understand how the human body works, understand how it could be a microcosm of the universe. And they would apply that anatomy to try to make the most realistic looking figures, but they'd also put like secret codes into their artwork and hidden messages to preserve these ideas for future generations. Like, for example, in the creation of Adam, the painting of the Sistine Chapel, the one where he's reaching out and pointing like that, God, in that weird cape thing that is flying all around him and with all those figures in it, is the pattern of the brain. And then you have the different brain stems that are coming down, the different areas of the brain. This is something that they figured out. And this really goes deep. They were really trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. And so what happens with that brain is that brain animates the inner. If you look at David, he's like that. Not David. If you look at Adam, he's like this. He's not turned on yet. He's not awake. He needs that brain to animate him. You have the brain and the spinal cord. That's where the pattern comes from. That's the animating spirit. This is where your DNA is encoded at and is put into the rest of your body. And so what happens, you have the father, that is the pattern, and you have the mother, that is the material. When the sperm cell goes into the egg and it starts to develop into a fully blown human being, I don't know why they don't teach this in science class, but when the sperm cell goes into the egg and conception happens, and they start to develop, that sperm cell turns into a brain and a spinal cord. And the egg turns into all of the rest of the material that the body is made out of. So you have the animating spirit, the pattern of it all, goes and enlivens the inert material. And with the two of them merged together in a perfect harmony, you have life. And what happens is, if you cut the brain and spinal cord out, the material dies. So it's built into the language. You can't get over that everything has a religious nature. There is a pattern of animation throughout all of the material realm that is the same across time. There is a fundamental principle, universal principles of design that exist outside of time and space Plato talks about with the forms. And we don't have enough time to go into the theory of forms, but that's a video for another day. But basically, there's these universal principles of design, and that comes down from the gods. And we can't properly understand our position in the world if we don't have someone to teach us about that. Most churches don't really teach about it this way. Most churches are very disconnected from this. Like Protestantism in particular is like the main religion in America, and they don't really connect it to the ancient. They don't really connect it that much to the timeless. But if you go to like an Eastern Orthodox church, or if you go to like a Roman Catholic church that's a lot more connected to the ancient, it's a lot more connected to the timeless, you'll start to see the art and the architecture and the ritual and the pattern. Like these things are not arbitrary. They're deeply and profoundly connected to the nature of the universe itself, and they literally teach you how the universe works. And like every great religion, essentially what they're doing is they're teaching you how the universe works and how to orient your life towards a better way. Like Christianity wasn't even called Christianity in the beginning. It was called just the way. That's what Taoism is. It's the way. That's what Buddhism is. It's the path. It's all about we're front-facing creatures. We're moving forward. How do we know we're moving forward in a good direction? The church is the heart of the family and the city, for it teaches us to live justly, honor God, and serve our neighbors, without which no household or republic could stand. This is another perfect example. That's from Alberti. He was a really prominent writer. He wrote on the art of building, on the art of painting. He was a Renaissance guy. He wrote a bunch of books that basically all the other Renaissance artists read, and they said, hey, look, we got to take these ideas. They're super valuable. And he got it, man. He said, look, it's not just the household or the republic. It's both the household or the republic. It's not either or. It's literally both of them can't stand. You have to have the church as the heart of both the family and the city, because it teaches you, what do we properly honor? What do we properly have reverence for? How do we serve our neighbors? Because you don't live in isolation. Isolationism and individualism is an extremely toxic idea. You live in a relationship to the world around you and relationship to others around you. Like I said, meritocracy is a terrible idea if you don't incorporate charity into it. It's a very dangerous idea to say your value is only based off of the value you contribute. There's a certain value that you have that doesn't matter how much value you contribute, because there's a potential there. And it's not always about the actualized potential. We get lost in the material realm when we see, I only could see the actualized potential, and because this person hasn't contributed anything that I could measure right now, I'm just assuming they're worthless. That's a bad idea. And you need the church to remind you of that. Here's one last quote. This is specifically about Florence, by Guicciardini. He says, the church in Florence, through its sermons and sacraments, binds the people to virtue and to the republic, for without its guidance, our city would fall into discord. So you have this idea of harmony and like beauty, and beauty is harmony. And what is harmony? If you think about everything, Plato had this idea of the harmony of the spheres. Like he studied all of the planets and how they move in the heavens, and how there's actually like a geometrical musical pattern, and there's resonation with like musical notes that exist in a natural world, from like the way that bees fly or the way that flowers blossom and the way that the planets move, all of that. Like it's all connected actually to music. And that's all connected to math. Like it's formulaic actually. And so harmony, what's a harmonious song? It's a pattern properly played out. It's the notes are in the right order. So that's what beauty is. It's the pattern properly laid out in the material realm. So it's not an abstract concept of beauty, but it's actually a concrete way of life. It's a tangible way of life. I said before that the family is probably the most important aspect of this. What I said is probably is because of this section right here. I would argue this is actually even more important than that, and that the two are interconnected. You can't separate those two, because you get the idea of the family from the religious idea. They're interconnected. The father and the mother is a religious idea. The pattern and the material, that's a religious idea. So this is the middle of everything, the center of everything, and the foundation of the world. The church has to be in the middle. So anytime you see a new city being built, we need to be thinking, what do we put in the middle? So whenever you're thinking about how do you add to your life, how do you expand if you're going to be buying a new house, how do you put God in the middle of that? How do you put your religion? If you maybe you're a polytheist, how do you put the gods in the middle of that? Because everybody worships something. You can't get away with it. Everybody has something that they pay reverence to. And is it just happening to you by accident, or are you being actually conscious and aware of what it is that you're pointing towards your attention to? Because sometimes these patterns, these so-called patterns, they're actually in great dissonance with nature. And they go against all things. The Bible talks about this. There's people that are contrary to all men. There's people in religious systems that go against everything. Satan is the accuser and the deceiver. There's people that present patterns that are actually lies. So how do you find which one is actually the truth? Which one actually goes in harmony? This is something that everybody in the Renaissance, they spent all of their money trying to figure that out and then making art that preserved that for future generations. Because they're like, I'm not just going to rely on this institution to stick around. Like, I want to, like Leonardo da Vinci was like, maybe my writings will get burned. But in this painting, there's an idea there that points towards the truth. And it will give you a whole new way to look at Renaissance art. It'll give you a whole new way to look at ancient art. Because this modern art, we talked about before, it's all deconstructivism. How do we redefine beauty? Well, that wasn't the case for the majority of the history of the world. It was all about how do we strive to attain it? Because there is an objective quality to it. If you think about a circle, it's like a circle is not a subjective thing. It's like all the circles in the eye of the beholder. It exists outside of time and space. There's a round quality to it. This is what Plato was talking about with the forms. There's a quality to it that exists outside of time and space. And like you have different manifestations of it localized throughout the universe, varying from time to time and place to place. But you take that shape and you remove it from any particular instance and it still exists. And there's a pattern that it has to follow. And if it doesn't follow that pattern, it doesn't meet that definition requirement. And the religious aspect of it, the church, the gods, that's the only way to actually properly understand it. And if you try to take that out, you're totally missing the point. I mean, it sounds like these are connecting a lot of different far-reaching ideas, right? It sounds like, well, it's a little bit of science, it's a little bit of math, it's a little bit of music, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That kind of sounds crazy, you know? Like, we don't think of church today as that way. Although you do go there and you sing songs and you have lectures and you have certain structures of the building and all of that. But this is like really stretching it. And this is where we get into point number 9. The polymath. It's basically like you're taking all of these different ideas and you're merging them into one, and you study lots of things. Like today we just have specialists. That wasn't the case back then. Yes, you specialize in certain things, but you were actually considered far more credible if you were like a doctor who studied music also. So we'll get into that next.